It's March 22nd, 1916. 10:47 a.m. The Atlantic Ocean, 85 miles southwest of Ireland. A rusty, unremarkable tramp steamer called the Farnborough is chugging through moderate swells at 8 knots. She looks like every other worn-out cargo ship crossing these waters, peeling paint, a thin wisp of smoke from her stack, a crew of merchant sailors going about their business on deck. A German U-boat commander watches through his periscope, 400 yards off the steamer's port bow. U-68 has been hunting in these shipping lanes for 3 days. This target looks perfect, small, slow, unarmed, an easy kill that won't waste a torpedo. The U-boat surfaces. What the German commander doesn't know, what he has no way of knowing, is that the Farnborough isn't a merchant ship at all. Behind her rusted hull plates are hidden gun ports. Below her decks, 34 Royal Navy sailors are crouched at battle stations, hands on weapons, waiting for the order to fire. And on her bridge, a 30-year-old Royal Navy lieutenant commander named Gordon Campbell is watching the submarine surface through a slit in the wheelhouse. Campbell doesn't flinch. He doesn't alter course. He lets the U-boat get closer. The Germans are about to learn what a Q-ship is. The hard way. By 1916, German submarines were strangling Britain. U-boats had sunk over 1.3 million tons of Allied shipping in the previous year alone. The Royal Navy had battleships, cruisers, destroyers, but none of them could catch a submerged submarine. Depth charges existed but were primitive. Sonar hadn't been invented yet. Convoys weren't organized until 1917. Britain was running out of options. And food. German Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz had promised to starve the British into surrender within 5 months. He wasn't bluffing. Import tonnage was dropping fast. The math was simple. If the U-boats kept sinking ships faster than British yards could build them, Britain would lose the war without Germany firing a single shell at London. The Admiralty needed something unconventional, something the Germans wouldn't see coming. Their solution was deception on a scale never attempted in naval warfare. Take civilian vessels, cargo ships, fishing trawlers, coastal freighters, and convert them into warships. Hide the guns, disguise the crew, make everything look normal until the enemy is close enough to die. The concept was simple. The execution was suicidal. Q-ship crews volunteered knowing the odds. They were sailing in thin-hulled vessels with hidden ammunition, deliberately attracting submarine attacks. If a torpedo hit first, they were dead. If the Germans figured out the trap before surfacing, they were dead. If anything went wrong during the engagement, they were dead. And yet, hundreds of men signed up. Real quick before we dive deeper, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. What city, what state, what country, and what time is it where you are? Always cool to see how far this community reaches. All right, let's get back into it. The U-boat threat wasn't just serious, it was existential. Germany had entered the war with only 28 operational submarines. By 1916, that number had grown to over 100, with new boats launching every month. These weren't the primitive submersibles of earlier decades. The German-type U-31 class could dive to 50 meters, cruise at 9 knots underwater, and carry up to 12 torpedoes. A single U-boat on a 3-week patrol could sink a dozen ships, and the Royal Navy couldn't stop them. Britain's surface fleet was the most powerful in the world. Dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, hundreds of destroyers. But submarines changed everything. A U-boat could spot a warship from periscope depth, dive deep, and disappear. The ocean was too vast, the submarines too small, and the detection technology too primitive. Hunting U-boats with destroyers was like hunting mosquitoes with sledgehammers. The numbers told the story. In 1915, U-boats sank 748 Allied ships totaling 1.3 million gross tons. The Royal Navy, in response, destroyed exactly 19 submarines. That's a kill ratio of roughly 40 to 1 in Germany's favor. Britain was losing this war beneath the waves. Worse, the Germans had refined their tactics. Early in the war, U-boat commanders followed prize rules: surface, warn the crew, allow them to abandon ship, then sink the vessel. Civilized warfare, or something like it. But by 1915, British countermeasures had made surfacing dangerous. Armed merchant cruisers, patrol boats, even ramming attempts convinced German commanders to shoot first. Unrestricted submarine warfare began in February 1915. U-boats started torpedoing ships without warning. Passenger liners, hospital ships, neutral vessels. The sinking of the Lusitania in May 1915 killed 1,298 people, including 128 Americans. International outrage forced Germany to temporarily suspend the policy, but the damage was done. The rules had changed. The Royal Navy tried everything conventional: patrol zones, indicator nets, armed escorts, mine barrages across the English Channel and North Sea. None of it worked well enough. Submarines slipped through, ships kept sinking. The British public grew increasingly desperate as food prices doubled and imported goods became scarce. What the Admiralty needed was a way to make U-boats surface voluntarily, and then kill them before they could dive again. This is where the Q-ship concept found its purpose. German commanders preferred gun attacks on small, unarmed vessels. Torpedoes were expensive and limited. A surfaced U-boat could sink a tramp steamer with its deck gun in 10 minutes, saving torpedoes for larger targets. This tactical preference created a vulnerability. If a ship looked helpless enough, the U-boat would surface. If the U-boat surfaced within 400 yards, hidden guns could destroy it before the crew could react. The theory was sound. The practice required nerves of absolute steel. Q-ship crews had to absorb the first attack. They had to watch shells hit their ship, see fires break out, feel the deck shudder, and do nothing. Any premature movement, any hint of military discipline, and the U-boat would dive. The submarine had to believe it was killing a defenseless merchant crew right up until the moment the gun ports dropped and the shooting started. This required a special kind of deception, and a special kind of man to pull it off. Gordon Campbell was not what you'd expect from a hero. Born in 1886, he'd joined the Royal Navy at 13 as a cadet. By 1915, he was a lieutenant commander with a solid but unremarkable career. Destroyer duty, routine patrols, nothing distinguished. He was quiet, methodical, and patient. Not the swashbuckling type. He was perfect for Q-ship command. Campbell took over the Farnborough in early 1916. She was a 3,000-ton collier, deliberately chosen for her ordinary appearance. Below decks, naval engineers had installed 3 12-pounder guns, 2 6-pounders, and a pair of Maxim machine guns. The weapons were concealed behind hinged hull plates that could drop in seconds. The crew of 69 included Royal Navy gunners, engineers, and a medical officer, all dressed as scruffy merchant sailors. Campbell's tactical innovation was the panic party. Here's how it worked. When a U-boat surfaced and opened fire, a portion of the crew would stage a convincing abandonment. They'd scramble onto the deck in apparent chaos, lower lifeboats badly, shout and wave their arms, and row away from the ship as fast as possible. They looked like terrified civilians fleeing a sinking vessel. Meanwhile, the gun crews stayed hidden at their stations. The ship continued to take hits. Fires burned. The vessel listed. And through it all, Campbell waited on the bridge, watching the submarine through a concealed viewing slit, calculating the range. The panic party served 2 purposes. First, it convinced the U-boat commander that the ship was genuinely helpless, just merchant sailors abandoning a doomed freighter. Second, it drew the submarine closer. German commanders would approach to finish off the vessel with close-range gunfire, conserving ammunition. They'd surface fully, exposing the hull. That's when Campbell would give the order. The gun ports dropped. The white ensign ran up the mast, and at ranges sometimes under 100 yards, Royal Navy gunners opened fire with everything they had. The mathematics of the engagement favored the Q ship. A surfaced U-boat was vulnerable. Its pressure hull couldn't withstand direct hits from 12-pounder shells. Its deck gun crew was exposed. It needed at least 30 seconds to dive, an eternity under concentrated fire. If the Q ship achieved surprise, the submarine was dead. Campbell drilled his crew relentlessly. They practiced the panic party until it looked genuine. They rehearsed the gun reveal until they could drop the ports and fire the first salvo in under 5 seconds. They trained damage control parties to fight fires while maintaining the deception. On March 22, 1916, it all came together. When U-68 surfaced and approached the Farnborough, Campbell let the German commander close to 80 yards. The submarine fired several rounds into the steamer. The panic party performed flawlessly, men tumbling into lifeboats, shouting in apparent terror, rowing away in disorder. The U-boat came alongside to finish the job. Campbell dropped the ports. 3 12-pounders and 2 6-pounders opened fire simultaneously. The first salvo hit the conning tower. The second ripped through the pressure hull. U-68 never had a chance to dive. She sank in under 2 minutes with all hands. Gordon Campbell had just proven the Q-ship concept worked. He would go on to sink 2 more U-boats and damage several others. For his actions, he received the Victoria Cross, the first Q-ship commander so honored. Campbell's most legendary engagement came on February 17, 1917. He was now commanding HMS Farnborough's successor, a Q-ship designated Q5, disguised as the collier Pargest. The ship was patrolling the western approaches, the critical shipping lanes southwest of Ireland, where U-boats concentrated their attacks. At 9:45 a.m., a torpedo slammed into Q5's port side. No warning, no surfaced submarine, just a massive explosion that ripped a 40-foot hole in the engine room, killed 2 sailors instantly, and flooded the compartments below the waterline. The ship immediately began listing 15 degrees to port. Water poured in faster than the pumps could handle. Most captains would have abandoned ship. Campbell did the opposite. He ordered the panic party away, 12 men scrambling into lifeboats with convincing desperation. The rest of the crew stayed at battle stations, hidden, waiting. Campbell knew the U-boat commander would surface to confirm the kill. German captains logged their tonnage sunk. They needed visual confirmation. For the next 35 minutes, Q5 slowly sank while her crew waited in silence. The ship settled lower. The list increased to 20 degrees. Seawater reached the magazine. Campbell ordered the ammunition moved to the starboard guns. The port weapons were now underwater. Men worked in flooded compartments, chest deep in freezing Atlantic water, hauling shells by hand to the remaining operational guns. Then, at 10:20 a.m., a periscope appeared 400 yards off the starboard beam. Campbell watched it circle the dying ship. The German commander was cautious. He'd torpedoed the vessel. Now he wanted to make sure it wasn't a trap. The periscope observed for 10 minutes. It watched the lifeboats rowing away. It watched the ship settling deeper. It saw no movement on deck. At 10:36 a.m., UC-29 surfaced. The submarine came up 50 yards from Q5's starboard quarter, point-blank range. The German captain climbed onto the conning tower to observe his kill. His deck gun crew emerged to man their weapon. Campbell gave the order. The remaining gun ports crashed down. The white ensign flew up. 2 12-pounders and a 6-pounder opened fire from a sinking ship at a range where missing was impossible. The first shell hit UC-29's conning tower and killed the captain instantly. The second penetrated the pressure hull forward of the gun. The third detonated inside the submarine. UC-29's bow lifted out of the water, then the entire vessel slid backward and sank stern first in under 90 seconds. Q5 was still sinking. Campbell now faced a second battle, keeping his ship afloat long enough for rescue. The crew worked the pumps continuously. They shored up bulkheads with mattresses and timber. They jettisoned cargo to reduce weight. For 6 hours, they fought the Atlantic Ocean. HMS Doris, a destroyer, finally arrived and took Q5 under tow. The battered Q ship was dragged 110 miles to Queenstown, Ireland, her deck nearly awash, her crew exhausted beyond description. Campbell received a bar to his Victoria Cross, one of only 3 men in history to receive that honor during World War I. Every surviving crew member received a decoration. The Admiralty promoted Campbell to commander on the spot. But Q5 wasn't finished. She was repaired, renamed Dunraven, and sent back to sea. Campbell would fight one more major engagement in August 1917, taking on UC-71 in a brutal surface action that left his ship burning and sinking, again, before the submarine escaped damaged. By war's end, Campbell had participated in the destruction or damaging of at least 3 U-boats. His personal kill count placed him among the most successful anti-submarine commanders of the war. The Q-ship program ran from 1915 to 1918. At its peak, the Royal Navy operated over 200 decoy vessels of various types, converted colliers, fishing trawlers, coastal schooners, even sailing ships. They ranged from 200-ton smacks to 4,000-ton freighters. All shared the same mission: look helpless, lure submarines to the surface, and kill them at close range. The results were mixed but significant. Q-ships confirmed the destruction of 14 German U-boats throughout the war. They damaged at least 60 others, forcing them to abort patrols and return to port for repairs. Beyond the direct kills, the psychological impact was substantial. German U-boat commanders became paranoid. Every merchant ship might be a trap. Every easy target might shoot back. This paranoia changed German tactics in ways that helped the Allies. U-boat captains grew reluctant to surface for gun attacks. They increasingly relied on torpedoes instead, expensive weapons in limited supply. A submarine that expended its torpedoes early had to return to base, reducing time on patrol. The Q-ship threat didn't stop the U-boat campaign, but it made it less efficient. The cost was steep. Of approximately 200 Q-ships deployed, 27 were sunk by enemy action. Over 900 Royal Navy and Merchant Navy personnel died serving on these vessels. The casualty rate exceeded 20%, higher than most conventional warship assignments. These men sailed into combat on thin-hulled ships loaded with hidden ammunition, deliberately inviting attack. The Victoria Cross was awarded to 5 Q-ship commanders and crew members. Campbell received his twice. Lieutenant William Sanders, commanding the Schooner Prize, received his posthumously after fighting UC-36 in a 20-minute surface battle despite having his ship shot to pieces. Lieutenant Charles Bonner earned his for continuing to fight after being wounded twice, while his Q-ship Dunraven burned around him. By late 1917, the Q-ship's effectiveness had declined sharply. German naval intelligence identified the tactic. U-boat commanders received briefings on recognition features, ships that sat too low in the water, crews that moved with suspicious coordination, vessels that didn't match their stated cargo manifests. The element of surprise, essential to the Q-ship's success, eroded. The convoy system, finally implemented in mid-1917, proved more effective at protecting merchant shipping. Grouped vessels with destroyer escorts reduced losses dramatically. The Q-ship transitioned from a primary anti-submarine weapon to a secondary harassment tool. But the concept didn't die. The Royal Navy operated Q-ships again in World War II. HMS Doris, disguised as a Norwegian freighter, patrolled the Atlantic in 1940. The results were less successful. German commanders had learned from the previous war, and improved torpedoes made surface approaches unnecessary. The tactical legacy persisted in other forms. Deception operations became standard military doctrine. Dummy tanks at D-Day, ghost armies broadcasting fake radio traffic, inflatable aircraft on airfields, all descended conceptually from the Q-ship's fundamental insight. The enemy will believe what they expect to see. Gordon Campbell survived the war. He rose to Rear Admiral, wrote extensively about his experiences, and became a member of Parliament. He died in 1953 at age 67, one of the most decorated naval officers in British history. His crews returned to civilian life with medals and memories most couldn't discuss for decades. Many suffered what we'd now recognize as post-traumatic stress. Men who had waited silently while their ships were shot apart, who had watched friends die without being able to respond, who had killed at ranges close enough to see their enemies' faces. They had volunteered to be bait. And against a weapon that nearly won the war for Germany, they had made a difference. 14 submarines confirmed destroyed, 60 damaged. Thousands of Allied sailors and merchant mariners who made it home because a U-boat captain hesitated, second-guessing whether that rusty freighter might shoot back. That was the Q-ship's real victory. Not just the kills, but the doubt.